I knew there was something to this voice that was coming through. I feel different. My life looks different. By choosing to come back, I would need to do some self-introspection and began to call myself out for those lower frequency patterns. I began to understand myself as a soul first in human form. And I was able to see in a more magnified way my life patterns and the lessons and teachings. The work that I do as a spiritual hypnotherapist is less about what I'm doing for you as a client. It's more about what I'm empowering you to do for yourself.
Yes, and there we are. It's recording, at least on my side, it looks like. Welcome, dear listeners from around the world, to another episode of the Schirach Show with me, your host, and the second part with Amy Marohn from Seattle. In the first episode, we talked about Amy's near-death experience, and we went a bit left and right. And today we want to look at how this near-death experience shaped her professional life, and especially her spiritual hypnotherapy and how she helps business leaders. If you want to know more about Amy, go back to the first episode, because there we also go a little bit more who she is and everything. Welcome, Amy, for part number 2. We had a little bit more talk before that show. Thank you for that. And
Sure.
welcome.
It's great. Thank you so much, Oliver. It's so great to be back. And I'm really excited to share more about this spiritual awakening that I had as a result of my chronic illness and my near-death experience. And so shall I dive in about what happened afterwards?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. You also talked about all the different chronic diseases you had, which did not just dissolve just because you had a near-death experience, as we hear of so many other near-death experiences which had cancer and other diseases or were hit by a car, whatever it is, right? And they came back and everything was healed, but not in your case.
Right. That's a beautiful distinction. In fact, Oliver, I just over the weekend wrote and published a new blog on my website about soul upgrades. I mean, this is an interesting topic. I had another podcast interview ask me if, as a result of this experience, I felt I either had a soul upgrade or a walk-in.
Oh, yeah.
What a great conversation. And so by soul upgrade, meaning she wondered if I became more clear about my spiritual mission and my soul contracts and my higher purpose here on the earth plane. And the answer is yes. There was a slow build to gaining more clarity about why I'm here. But then she tapped into another concept that I don't think is a commonly understood term, and that's a walk-in. And by that, Oliver, she meant, did my soul leave and was it replaced by another soul? Fascinating concept.
Have you heard of that before she asked you?
I have. Yeah, I have. And I was a little surprised by her level of spiritual sophistication. And for those watching and listening, I will share that a walk-in, although the souls are exchanged, your personality, you come back still as the same person in human form. So your personality is intact. Obviously the components of your life are similar. It is, I guess one could argue it's a form of a soul upgrade. It's the soul exchange. program. I didn't get the sense that my soul was swapped out. I do absolutely, in retrospect, understand that this was a soul upgrade, meaning that in this lifetime, by choosing to come back, I would need to do what they call in, many recovery programs, a I would have to do some self introspection and began to call myself out for those lower frequency patterns. In other words, where in my life had I encouraged chaos in relationships or situations? Where in my life had I taken more of the victim stance? What were the parts of my human persona that I chose to hide behind in fear, rather than allowing myself to live more authentically. So it became more trying to figure out how I could live in greater alignment with the authentic self or the higher self. And so, and we'll dig into that a little more, because that's a long journey. Very few of us have the benefit of that light switch turning on. We are all always in the process of becoming. But at any rate, deeper dive into that topic, you can read some of these blogs. I find that many of these podcast hosts are very enlightened beings in my soul tribe that are even challenging me to think more deeply about my path. And I'm so grateful for that. So even though this near-death experience, Oliver, didn't lead to, complete and instant restoration of my physical health, I absolutely believe it put me on a spiritual health of being a healthier soul, if that makes sense.
Or a healthier person, perhaps. Like, and
Absolutely.
you put a lot of points. It's like this walk-in. I've heard that. Oh my God, 6 years ago, something like that. Someone talking about a walk-in, and she explained it that she felt a bit off. That was like that she was kind of like 24, 25, and overcame a cancer disease and basically figured out what was the root cause of that cancer, and that was the trauma she felt as a child. She was not allowed to be loud and playful and dancing around, and she was bottling that up in all the professional ways. She was like super successful in corporate. I don't know if it was law or something, but she got super sick. And then when she really released this, she basically has the, how she says it, and her spiritual guide said she leveled up faster than they expected. They thought she will use a whole lifetime to learn the lesson, but she was like 24, 5, 6. And so basically her soul wanted to leave, but her ego or her beingness or whatever you want to call it said, no, this is a good body, it's a good life. Why leave it? And there was a shaman medicine man there, and he did some chanting and like help a new soul to replace it. So it was not a near-death experience. But she said for like a few weeks she felt a bit not herself, and then she felt herself. And that was like a walk-in. That's the first time I heard it. So I was like, how is that?
Fascinating.
So like you say the same person, but not. It's kind of like new. She said there were new tasks for that person, new learnings.
Yes, absolutely fascinating. Well, I mean, it taps into so many deeper questions. Having not experienced a walk-in, but rather a soul upgrade, I felt the same person, but it allowed me to look at my life path through more of a spiritual lens. And it's not that the work that I had been doing prior to becoming a spiritual hypnotherapist was disconnected. There was still this underlying current of, wanting to help humanity, of always wanting to represent and improve the lives of disadvantaged populations. So I was still the same person. But spirit, through this two-way communication, when the blending of the two worlds, and I had received higher wisdom clairvoyantly and clairaudiently and clairsentiently, I began to understand myself as a soul first in human form. And I was able to see in a more magnified way my life patterns, and the lessons and teachings. So spirit was really challenging me to release the pain and the hurt and the heaviness of those lessons and teachings, but rather learn to call out the wisdom of it and use that wisdom from this lifetime as an anchor to become something more fruitful and more in alignment with the truth of who I am. Right. And so I see a lot of corporate, I was in a corporate role. And we talked about this earlier before jumping on the podcast, about how challenging it is for light workers, which by the way is a frequency, not a title, how difficult it is for people like us to fit inside of a corporate box.
Yeah. I just had a discussion with my yoga teacher, and because I'm in a new beginner class, and I'm sitting there, and yeah, now I have to be careful. I don't know if they'll listen to the episodes. I don't want to offend anyone, but they feel much more sensitive than any other class I have been with my teacher. And I asked him, like, so why am I in this class? And he looked at me like, yeah, because Oliver, you're in way too masculine energy. You have all this bottled up anger. You don't know how to use your fire. When we look at the Ayurvedic, I'm suppressing my fire. So I'm not using my management and all these things. So I have the bleedings, I have all these things, I have the explosions. And I said, so it's like I'm too much in the masculine, and several of the other people are in very feminine, very sensitive. So he put that comparison to me and said, like, these 2-3 people here, as long as the energy is good and positive, they can work. They can just sit there and just take a piece and put it over, and I get money for it. It wouldn't matter because the material is beyond them, because they've risen in there from the lower chakras higher and higher, and they dissolved those karmic patterns, those dharma, karma.
Sure.
And they're in the high levels, so this doesn't bother them anymore. And I'm still on this separation. The material is not important. It's still important. It's kind of like I'm really in this internal struggle. I'm like, whatever, fuck all. Like, sorry for the word, but I don't need all these material things here. Let's just give them away. Let's just give them to the Red Cross, whatever. Give it to people. But then on the other hand, I have a hard time to pay my bills, and I get super stressed and super annoyed. And I want to have that Porsche. I want to have that nice car. I want to have that nice TV. Parts of me, like, whatever. It doesn't matter. And I really feel it like that. I really, like, whatever. I don't need it. And then it's like, oh, I want to have, like, this nice cup. I want to have this nice plate. This nice TV. It's like this. It's crazy sometimes inside myself. Yeah.
Absolutely, right? And we all struggle with those, inner stirrings or imbalances. We have in some more than others, right? For me, through this two-way communication with the unseen world, I began to understand the concept of cognitive dissonance. That separation between what I know to be true of me versus the choices that I make that are not in alignment with who I am as a soul. And some people more easily recognize and feel in their physical bodies that divide, right? And so so much of my work with my clients is how do we narrow that gap, right? For some people with a history of trauma, and I'll just give you an example. If you grew up in a family where, your mother was very demanding and very judgmental and very controlling, obviously it's going to be very challenging to work in a work setting where your immediate supervisor create some of those same patterns, right? They can be very, very triggering. And if we don't recognize those patterns or that unhealed trauma inside of us, there's no way that we'll be able to resolve this inner stirring this type of work relationship creates inside of us. And even more so, we won't see the red flags in the beginning that are telling our physical body, like, stay in fight or flight, right? You're in this state of consistent hypervigilance. And a lot of my corporate clients who come to me to do some of the deeper work, it really is a matter of looking at their early beginnings and understanding, why am I so reactive? Why am I responding to this work dynamic? And what can I do about it? And by the way, the answer to how to resolve this lies within each individual person, right? Person A may need to resolve this by finding another job. Person B might need to resolve this by having a heart-to-heart talk with the supervisor that's creating these triggering patterns. There's no right or wrong answer in a lot of cases. It's a matter of what's the best solution for where you are in your stage of development emotionally and spiritually. Because I also believe if we don't tackle these things, the universe has a way of delivering the same messages in different forms until finally we face it and we're willing to walk through, the eye of the storm, head on and just face it, our own inner demons. Because it's less about that other person and it's more about, again, our own healed trauma that needs to be addressed. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? I know I leapfrogged
No,
ahead
no,
there.
no. There's like 2 or 3 points, and let's see if I can remember them all. One thing is when you talked about the soul upgrade, for me it was like when you shared all these different things, like the triggers, etc. It's like, I don't know if that's what how it felt for you. I feel like, okay, the life before the near-death experience, you had a certain way of living, certain things triggered you, and you had certain ways of not feeling the triggers, right? And you didn't have the claircognizance, you didn't have the clairvoyance and all these things. These came afterwards, these extra gifts. So the upgrade was the clairvoyance and claircognizance things.
Yes.
And was it also to be actually able to then see those patterns and actually welcome those triggers where before you bypass them through whatever activities?
Yes. 100%. Yes. And all of these, this advanced understanding of this spiritual path I'm on, I mean, it unfolded organically at a level that represented my own spiritual maturity or evolvement. And so what I mean by that is, and I can think of an example that I think will resonate with a lot of people. Oftentimes we follow a certain career path because it's what our parents expect of us. And their expectations may have been very, very subtle. Very, very subtle. But there's this on a subconscious level. We can learn from our parents, gosh, having a paycheck every week, financial security, working for big box corporations, having the title, having all the accoutrements of mainstream success, the 401k, the health insurance, all those things are like the top of the list. Like those become the benchmarks by which most of us learn to evaluate how valuable we are in society. But what if that doesn't work? What if that's not your calling? I remember, I'm skipping over some important parts of my spiritual mediumship unfoldment and how I ended up in this profession. So we'll backtrack a little later. But what I want to say is that the point at which I knew that in the beginning I would work as a spiritual hypnotherapist, I remember my mom saying to me, "That sounds like a great hobby." And my heart sank into my feet, Oliver, because I thought, how did she get from me trying to explain my deep desire to bring all of my 25 plus years in the rehabilitation counseling industry and absorb that into my role as a hypnotherapist and now a spiritual hypnotherapist. And I want to explain the difference because there's a huge difference between mainstream hypnosis and spiritual hypnosis. But how do we get there, right? What a crazy judgment. And this was, and how that was so harmful to my wounded inner child. And it really set me up in the beginning to overperform and try to prove that I could make this a viable profession in the eyes of, her human lens.
Yeah, but as you said before as well, is like a lot of times the jobs we do and the careers we follow, it's to please the parents or the grandparents, or we just believe this is the right way because of something we read or schooling or whatever. But let's see. We talked a little bit in the first episode, but let's kind of help the people. Just short, like before you were working 25 years with helping people in different settings corporately, and then after the near-death experience, you didn't come back. The near-death experience happened home for you, right? If I remember right, you were in bed. You'd have no idea how long you were dead, if it was seconds or minutes or longer.
Right. Exactly.
How did you actually get into hypnotherapy, and what happened when you came back? Once you were not healed right away, but you were feeling different, kind of like you had this claircognizance and stuff, and the skills, the gifts, they are developing over time. They're not all came at one moment, right? They came over time, right? As I remember. So what did you work before, and what do you offer now, and kind of like what was the way in between, if that helps?
Absolutely. That's a beautiful question. And thank you for circling back around to kind of organize my thoughts or path here. So within days of having this near-death experience, I was walking down my hallway and again, through clear audience, I heard a thought. I'll call it the voice, but I heard a thought, and the thought said, "You're going back to school." And I thought that was crazy. I knew it didn't come from me. It came through me because, again, remember, I didn't have a spontaneous healing. I was still very, very sick. And, I had stepped away from my corporate role when I realized that, my chronic pain, my flu symptoms, just all the challenges of my immune system weren't going to allow me to live, the life of a, conventional corporate person. So I stepped away from that. So then this voice comes through and says, you're going back to school. And I'm like, that's odd. Didn't know what I was going back to school with. A few days later, walking down the same hall, you're going back to school to be a hypnotist. That was crazy, right? I might have said this in the last interview. That was exceptionally crazy. Now I knew I was being guided, Oliver. Didn't know a hypnotist, never sought out hypnotherapy treatment ever, and never even so much as went to my computer to Google and read a little bit more. It wasn't even on my radar. So that was very interesting. And then the most fascinating part, I think, about this journey is I didn't question this voice or these thoughts. And I knew that there was a higher intelligence involved in my path. Within a month's time, Oliver, and by the way, I had no money. I had no idea how I was going to pay my mortgage. I had purchased a new house within the last few years of this medical storm and crisis. I stepped away from a corporate job. Were it not for my mother who moved here from New York before all of this unfolded, I'm pretty sure I would have been homeless, living in my car with my son, who was young, under the age of 10 at that point. So I knew there was something to this voice that was coming through. I ended up going back, getting certified to work as a hypnotherapist. I'm sure at that point, slammed together a pretty pathetic looking website, took out a few ads, and honestly, my standards were low. I was desperate in the sense of like, okay, if this is a voice of spirit, whoever shows up is going to be a good thing. And if that leads to any money whatsoever that would empower me to put some food on the table, right? First things first, I'm not even thinking about, the sum total of the cost of my life, how much I would need to survive. I'm just thinking, you know what? I'm going to listen and I'm just going to let this unfold. So, in the beginning, Oliver, I didn't even know what to charge people. I didn't have any sophisticated software on the back end. I did have a background in business startups, but I had no idea. I mean, this wasn't plug and play. So I got this certification, but there's no infrastructure for my business. So
It's for the people that listen now. When was that? I mean, was it in 2020? Was it in 1990?
This was 10 years ago.
Okay.
In 2016, February of 2019 or 2016, I finished my certification. On that very same month, I put up a website, took out a few ads. I don't even know about social media or any of that. I'm a poor historian in terms of when I started weaving all of that.
Well, it's more like if it was in the 90s or if it was like the last, as you said, 2016.
But the ads and the website started, people started finding me. And at that point, Oliver, I would see anybody for anything and any reason. I kind of did things sliding scale. I started realizing right away that well beyond anything I learned in hypnosis, that my ultimate role here on planet Earth was to serve as a conduit to the spirit realm. In other words, the purest channel I can be to bring through wisdom for my clients in the form of words or deeper questions to help them be able to see themselves through a spiritual lens and look at their own life journey, the lessons, the teachings. I also realized that simultaneously, I was bringing through high frequency energies that were in some way helping my clients to be able to release trauma, even trapped in the cells of their body, and begin to recalibrate to the frequency of the divine self.
So the hypnotherapy you started, was that just like a traditional hypnotherapy, or was it directly in a spiritual?
Yeah, it's amazing. In the beginning, like every other hypnotherapist on the planet, right, we're taught to work from scripts. We don't realize this in the beginning. We're taught, it's kind of the one size fits all approach to an extent. In other words, Amy, if somebody comes to you to quit smoking, here's the protocol. If somebody comes to lose weight, here's the protocol. If somebody comes to you with, unhealthy relationship patterns, here's the protocol. Well, come to find out about maybe 6 months to a year into my work, I realized none of this works, right? I mean, it's reprogramming, helping people reprogram their mind based on, it's very, very formulaic, right? And it all became about like refinessing these scripts or these ideas that these seasoned hypnotherapists have worked with for decades. And I'm like, why would I do that? And then over time, I realized, okay, what are, I started to recognize a couple things. One, I believe that the most powerful healer of all is you, the client, right? And part and parcel with that realization, I also began to realize that the answers lie within, right? They're not within me or within you if you're working in any sort of healing modality. The answers lie within. So what would it look like? What tools would I need if then my role became more of a coach or a guide in helping each client understand their truth, right? What would it look like if my job then or my role was more about helping people discover a formula for their life that resonated best with their soul, right? So I often say my job is to help people dust off their soul and their wings, right? To discover, like, who am I? Why am I here? What's my mission as a soul? What is my higher purpose? And in order for me to get from where I am to where I want to be in this lifetime, what am I going to need to release? Right? Karmically, energetically, self-limiting beliefs, self-sabotaging behavior, right? What am I going to need to release in order to recalibrate to the frequency of the higher self?
Okay, so that means, as I understand you, you started from script, basically, for the stop smoking, stop drinking, get out of a toxic relationship kind of way.
Yep.
Trying to reprogram the mind with a new belief, going into the spiritual hypnotherapy is actually going into more the core of each individual. So how does that look like in practice? And who are your clients? Is it corporate? Is it private people? Is it groups? Or
Yep. All of the above.
all of the above?
All of the above, right? It is, look, it is, the work that I do works best for the spiritually inclined. I call them teachable souls. The people, again, they're not necessarily learning from me. But, because in truth, I'm asking the deeper questions. And a lot of times I'm feeding back to my clients their own inner wisdom, right? Their own, I'm sharing with them some spiritual observations, right? Some of which is coming through from higher realms, right? So that's where the mediumistic things come through. The spirit guide saying, hey, Amy, you might want to ask this, or you might want to rephrase that question, or point out some patterns, right? And help my clients begin to unpack some of this baggage.
Okay, so is that are the people coming to you, or are you doing that online, this hypnotherapy, or how does it work?
Both.
Both.
Both. Absolutely. I have clients all over the United States and other countries. But I also have a local client base where people come and spend time here in my sanctuary. So both of those, I've worked in corporate arenas with various departments within Amazon, in group settings, and also have done individual work with people working in various businesses throughout the world. So they come in from all different channels.
Yeah. So when I hear hypnotherapy, I just see people laying on a couch and they're completely gone.
Yeah.
And there's like a pendulum or
Yeah.
or a watch or something, and the people are completely gone, kind of like they're not conscious. So how is it when you work, especially if you work over the screen? Are people laying down and then you relax them and then you start to get in the subconscious, or how does that work?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I mean, Oliver, that's almost a whole other podcast. But what
No,
I'll
not
say,
technically,
I
but
use so many.
Just kind of like general, so people have a feeling like, okay, what is this hypno? Because I'm sure
Absolutely.
many people have heard about hypnotherapy, and that's not me. I don't want to be like, getting completely unconscious and whatever will they teach me, and then I will be walking around like a chicken and some weird stuff.
No, doesn't work like that. No, absolutely not. One thing I realized through some advanced training is that it is not necessary to get into the classic hypnotic state in order to resolve subconscious conflicts. Okay. You can do that through spiritual coaching. I use a lot of my mediumistic tools, where spirit will download questions that kind of cut to the core of where my clients are struggling, energetically, emotionally, spiritually, even physically. It's common. It's not common knowledge that you don't have to get into these deeper states in order to help people go into like a trance state or an altered state of consciousness. A lot of times I can tell a lot of times through conversation, I can tell that I'm provoking a deeper introspective work for my client because there's a deep pause, and the eyes roll to the corner of the room, because they're not giving me their rehearsed answers, and I'm promoting a deeper self-reflection of my clients, and that can be done using spiritual coaching tools. It can be used by channeling energies of the spirit realm, right, and asking these deeper questions or pointing out patterns that I am seeing by listening with my spiritual ears. There's so much. But do I also use what most people would consider traditional hypnosis? Yes and no. And so let me explain. When I put people in the other chair, I'm working differently. I think it's very important for clients to understand how to get themselves into a self-hypnotic state, but not so I can implant ideas into their heads, so to speak, or read off a script, or give them what's referred to as post-hypnotic suggestions. It's so much deeper than that. We did the candle exercise. That link hopefully will be placed in, yes, exactly. You experienced that. And the reason I teach that tool as a model for self-hypnosis and the more sophisticated use of this tool is mystical meditation. But here's why. Because when a person can slow down their brain waves, right, and enter into what hypnosis refers to as the theta state, right? Something very therapeutic happens. Number one, Oliver, we're able to help ourselves deactivate the primitive mind. Okay, that's the part of our mind that keeps us in fight or flight, right? I think one author called it the annoying roommate. That part of us that tells us, right, what you should do, that new things are not productive. It's that resistance piece in you, or that urgency that all of us have to do more or be more or prove ourselves, right? It's that state of constant hypervigilance that many of us are in and don't even realize it, okay? So through this candle meditation, we can deactivate, and this self-hypnotic tool, we can deactivate the primitive mind. But even more importantly, Oliver, through this tool with practice, I can help my clients tap in to the higher mind. Okay, and what is the higher mind? The higher mind is that infinitely wise part that lives within each one of us, that is very calm, that is very quiet and grounded, right? Because when we get into these deeper altered states, we are the most open and the most receptive to hearing our own inner wisdom. That small, quiet, calm voice within us that tells us, hey, Oliver, it's going to be okay. Or, hey, Oliver, you have nothing to prove here, right? You have everything you need to be wildly successful in whatever, in whatever path spirit leads you, right? It's a very gentle, very grounded, very wise part that lives inside each of us. This is a really, really important state. And through practice of this candle meditation and some of the advanced work that I do here with my clients, on an even greater level, when we get into these deeper states, we're also doing a form of energy healing on ourselves. And it's so organic and it's so natural because we begin to release some of those lower frequency energies like fear. We are now reprogramming our mind and body to the state of complete emotional quietude, right? And these energies begin to enter into our body on the deepest cellular level as we release old patterns It sounds so mystical and so complicated, but I am most interested in helping my clients learn to ignite their own inner healer. So the work that I do as a spiritual hypnotherapist is less about what I'm doing to you or for you as a client. It's more about what I'm empowering you to do for yourself. And that's the underlying difference between,
Yeah.
conventional
Yeah.
hypnosis, where I'm the expert, and spiritual hypnosis is that you are divinely wired to heal yourself. So let's engage that inner wisdom piece. Let's engage the higher mind. And for those of you who are listening or watching who are spiritual, the more advanced iteration of this tool is mystical meditation, where we drop down even deeper and we begin to open our spiritual pathways to the higher realms. And we ourselves become the channel to higher wisdom.
Okay, so let me try to see if I understand. Uh,
Yeah, that's a lot.
you shared a
Oh,
lot. So I have been on in two hypnosis session, but it was quite expensive, and I didn't have money as unemployed. And but there I was really like in a altered state. She didn't give me anything, and I don't remember any pendulum or something. I think it was just her
yeah,
energy, and I think she also was like spiritually guided. I don't remember anymore if I could find out who she is. She was in Denmark, and I felt very deep, very fast. It was like the
yeah,
typical you walk down a step and you get heavier and calmer.
yeah.
And I
Oh,
don't remember if it was 20 steps or 10 steps, and then you land on this
yeah.
soft place. I might also mix it up with these online dudes, these two guys,
Sure.
which have like these YouTube channels and also on Spotify. And they also use these steps to go down, and then you flow down the
Yeah,
water, and then you
yeah.
meet your inner child and whatever not. And I remember with her to be really deep, and she was surprised. She looked at me like, "You are so high up in your energy." She never expected after the first time that I went so deep. And I don't remember her
Yeah,
saying anything. I just remember her
yeah,
talking me down. And then, like,
yeah.
now we come back and, slowly back, and 5, 4, 2, 1, back.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, what's going on? I felt very relaxed and everything. And so I don't know if she
Mhm.
talked. And if she talked, I didn't hear anything. But I think she did more
Yeah,
energy healing.
yeah.
I think she was working more.
Sure. Yes.
So,
Very
yeah, and you
possible.
talk also about this opening up the people for themselves. And that's any spiritual help, or I would also say any traditional help. It doesn't have to be,
Mhm.
which really wants to help you, kind of tries to guide you in your own wisdom, in your inner knowing.
Yeah,
Uh, However they
yeah.
call it, they might not call it so spiritual because of the stigmata around the spiritual words, either for the client
Mhm.
or for the professional using those. But you said you're out of the closet. I can ask you whatever.
Completely. Uh-huh.
You went completely out of the closet. What was it? You said a few years ago. You said like I'm an NDer. You didn't share that in the beginning. Also say the
Right.
hypnotherapy, the spiritual. Do you do anything else besides the spiritual hypnotherapy or any other types of
Oh,
work?
absolutely. Absolutely. So as I mentioned, from the early beginning of my work through this near-death experience and this, um, you know, uncovering and refinement of my clairaudient, clairsentient, all the clairs, clairvoyant, all the things. I absolutely all day, every day, I'm channeling with my clients, whether or not they recognize the extent to the spiritual work that I do or not. I don't even have to mention spirit. It's just guiding me through my work. Before each and every one of my clients come to me or before we connect on Zoom, for sessions, I always go into a deeper state and ask Spirit to bring into my awareness anything they wish me to know that will help guide my work. And sometimes before the session, Spirit plants some seeds of wisdom. Other times, it's extraordinarily spontaneous. It's very spontaneous, where it just comes through on the spot. It's again very unrehearsed. What Spirit brings through. And so I'm always using mediumistic tools. The other piece is trance healing. By that I mean I work to bring through high frequency energies from the spirit realm during these sessions where I'm guiding my clients into the trance state. And what I've recognized as a hypnotherapist and metaphysical healer, Oliver, is that, there's 4 states of theta, or different depths and levels. And when people are doing the more simple form of hypnosis and helping people quit smoking, a lot of times they're getting them in the more surface state, which can be very effective in helping people. It can be, very helpful in helping people at least temporarily quit smoking. But I believe for the deeper changes to take hold, it needs to involve not only trance healing, but also getting in the deeper states where there is what I call an interactive energy healing taking place. And so when I can get people in that state, you mentioned the other hypnotist you worked with, so deep that they don't necessarily remember everything. Now I think those deeper states work so much better when you're doing energy healing with clients. And I just know this more from experience than from anything that you would learn in a class. And because it's not that my clients need to have all of these aha moments when they're in the chair or when they're in the session through spiritual coaching and mediumistic tools that I'm using. But I think the greater test of the efficacy of our work together is what's happening between sessions, right? Organically, what organic shifts are my clients experiencing? And even more so and even greater is, does this healing and evolution, or in many cases, mediumship unfoldment for them, continue to build momentum long after they leave our sessions, right? That they, here we've built the foundation. I'm tapping in to their higher self using many tools, not just one. Yes, do I borrow tools from hypnosis? Yes, but even more so, Spirit is guiding me in refining my own metaphysical tools, healing tools, that my client can get so much juice from. Oh, I call it more of a high octane fuel. And they leave this experience hopefully feeling more spiritually grounded, more emotionally resilient, and having a much greater understanding of what their role is here on the earth plane as a soul, right? And what kind of a spiritual imprint they're called to leave here through their work, or through their relationships with their family.
Yeah. You kind of started opening and the self-healing, what happens after. Do you have any story, one, or perhaps there's many, of your experience of a extraordinary healing that happened with your work, or a shift in the person's life or beingness?
Oh, many, a lot. I work a lot in the area of grief and loss. And typically, especially over the last, I would say 3 to 5 years, clients will seek me out because um, naturally they would love to connect with a loved one who has passed. They usually reach out to me within, a year or two of their loved one passing. And through word of mouth, as the case may be, they find out not only can I help them through spiritual hypnotherapy with grief and loss, but also I have this background in um, being a medium with mediumship healing, and they love the combination of both. And so, in my work with them, a lot of times in the chair or through our discussion, the spirit of their loved one comes through. And, through evidential mediumship, right? There's a difference between evidential and physical mediumship. Through evidential mediumship, the goal is to bring forth thoughts or ideas that are healing to my client, things they would want or need to know in order to help their heart heal, and then to have the courage to continue their life journey with their loved one now in spirit form. But the other piece, and again, it's so individual. A lot of this, Oliver, has to do with the frequency of the client coming into my space and their openness to receive higher level healing. But within the last year, I had a client in my chair and her frequency was so high. And so in this deeper theta state, she was able to experience her loved one in physical form, meaning she could feel her husband who had passed hugging her. She could smell the fragrance of him right before her, and she could hear him. And also, through her mind's eye and clairvoyance, see visions and images of him, and even tap into some very special, deep memories of them spending time together. And so that was very powerful. I haven't really heard of other, I say physical mediums. I believe this is a form of physical mediumship, because what is a physical medium? It's bringing forth physical evidence of the spirit realm. It's one thing for me to share with a client through evidential mediumship. Hey, your husband is saying this, and I can smell this kind of cologne on him, and I'm seeing a memory coming through that, and share X, Y, and Z. It's a whole nother level when we can create such high frequencies in this space and in this chair and through this healing session where my client can experience these things firsthand. And so that was a beautiful story. And I think it did bring my client a level of comfort in which she recognized, like, wow, he hasn't really left. He hasn't left me. He's with me. And all I need to do is create an opening or a willingness or a level of presence that invites him to get closer to me, right? My book talks about sitting in the power and how to connect with the spirit realm. So that I feel like that experience, it's on one of my podcasts that I interview this beautiful soul that had that experience. again, evidential mediumship is very, very healing. Physical mediumship, bringing in that level of healing. And again, I don't credit myself with, all of that ability. I think it had a lot to do with my client's frequency and her openness and her own spiritual evolution that invited that kind or that level of experience, healing experience, to be present during one of our sessions. So that was beautiful.
Yes, definitely. I can see when you feel it and you have this experience. Now, that client, was she open to the spiritual realm before, or was she very materialistic and after this life is over, it's over, we perish in whatever way we perish?
Yeah, she was very spiritually open. Her path was more conventional kind of religion and church, but she was very open to the afterlife, and her understanding. It definitely fit her frame of reference that, in her mind, we die, we pass into heaven and higher realms and all the things. But to give people this experiential type of session, that just, I think, further grounds them and heals them in their path. I mean, it doesn't, take the pain away per se, but I believe it offers assurances that our loved ones are safe and they're energetically, they're still hovering in this realm and they're available as an anchor to us in moving through what feels to be very lonely times of grief and
Yeah.
pain.
And do you also have the experience of someone which is on the other spectrum, which is very, as I said, materialistic and not really believing in these things, and then having this evidential
Yeah,
experience and
yeah,
kind of like a shift happening, like a spiritual
yes,
awakening, kind of?
absolutely. I have many stories. At one point, I had a gentleman who actually was a prosthetics engineer and was very, he made limbs for people and, had very much a science medical background, but he also had a lot of personal trauma, was moving through a very dark time in his life. And I did a healing, and he was also adamant, like, Amy, I don't want to do like the full program. He was very, very resistant. And this was earlier on in my practice when I was, how can I say, in a way, it was kind of bullying me. Like, okay, I see this is what you're recommending, but I just want you to know that I'm very closed. And, like, I don't need to know if all of this is going to work. Right. And I was at a point in my career where it's like, oh, if I could just pull them over. I don't do that anymore. People have to come willing, open, ready. Anyway, I'm like, okay, all right. I let them just just wrestle me to the ground. And I'm like, okay. So I invited him into my space, and then I'm like, I felt the pressure. I'm like, oh Lord, like I gotta make things happen really quickly for this man. And so he sat in my chair, and I did like graduate level things all at once. I forgot, I let go of all the, the scripts and the, just all the protocol, broke every rule I could possibly do as a young practitioner. Put him in this chair, drop him down into the deepest level of theta. And then basically I just said, quietly in my mind, Spirit, please come through and guide this entire session. Well, I did trance healing. I facilitated, a removal of all sorts of karmic energies. And I had him in the chair, probably about an hour and 15 minutes, maybe an hour and 20. I don't remember. But anyway, very deep, very long. Bring him up out of that session. He stands up slowly and he's like, I don't know what just happened, but I had an out of body experience. I was in a higher realm. I could see everything in high definition. Colors were brighter. Spirits hovering. I heard my own wisdom. I heard wisdom from other realms. I mean, he was really struggling to make sense of this. And he walked out into the other room and he said, Amy, I'm struggling to figure out even how to put on my shoes right now. Yes. And so I realized that what he experienced was beyond even my comprehension. And so he left that experience and reached out to me again. I don't know if it was days or a week later, and he said, that was life transforming. I don't know what happened in your space, but I feel different. My life looks different. Things are unfolding. I'm piecing things together. Anyway, so, he referred other people. I never define for my clients, like, what else there is in the universe. I give them an experience and they can extrapolate from that whatever they wish. And it may take them weeks or even months or years to really fully understand how that release and recalibration is going to manifest in their life. I had another experience of a chiropractor. I get a lot of, alternative healing people, even medical people, dentists and medical doctors, naturopaths in my chair. Another situation where I was dealing definitely either with an atheist or an agnostic. And I'm like, ooh, how am I gonna deliver this in a way that doesn't, create too many inner stirrings and all that stuff. Same situation. At first I had to deliver more of a mainstream hypnosis type services or sessions. But then after a while, Spirit's like, put him in the chair, Amy, and let's give him, the red carpet treatment with all of the, energy work and trance healing and all of the things. So we went there, same experience, where he said, he gets out of the chair and he said something along the lines of, there's definitely something out there, something more. I don't know what that is, but, and he didn't put a name or a label on it, totally fine. But he said, there's something else. And actually he's, he came back for several rounds after that because he recognized that we had tapped into either his higher mind or a higher realm. And I think he began to believe that these energies and tools would be kind of some next level things that would pull him out of some old patterns.
Yeah. Clients. I put some crisscross some questions I have here. You talked also about being authentic and then go towards authentic. But what is it actually? What does it mean being authentic for you in your experience?
Being authentic. Sure, on a very basic level, I will ask my clients, where in your life are you not living in alignment with who you are as a person? right? So the typical presentation we might see is like people pleasing. People who believe that, if they always volunteer at work to be on these committees that give them huge headaches and pull them off course, or they're always offering to fix something for a friend, whether it takes the form of, I don't know, lending money or, listening to a friend yammer on about their own victimhood, or, whatever it is, right? Or being the person in the family who does like all the caregiving or hosts every family event or holiday, but in the meantime is resenting it or feeling run down or taken advantage of, or is spending down every last bit of their energy and resources trying to win the undying love and unconditional affection and approval of their parents, whatever it is, or their boss. People do it all the time at work of, how can I prove myself? Or, how can I, and again, it happens on a subconscious level, all the ways that we wear ourselves thin.
Okay, so that's basically not being authentic. But then how do we know what is then the authentic
Right.
part? I mean, if you're the people pleaser, you
Right.
always step in and help, for example, or you do something for getting the love. So
Right.
how do you then know, okay, this is my pattern and I'm tired afterwards, I feel
Yeah.
heavy or whatever, or I
Yeah.
might be sick afterwards. I'm
Yeah.
not feeling good. Or I get angry, like the triggers, right? The emotions. But how do you then know what
Yeah.
is then the authentic part? How do you know?
Yeah. Being honest. Being honest with people. You know what? I would normally do this, but I'm tired. Or putting it back on somebody else, like the friend that's always asking for advice but never takes it. Turning around and saying, well, I see you're in a conundrum here. What do you think you can do about it? Right? What are you willing to do about it? Right? Hand it back right to the offender. It's not our journey or lesson. And helping people take shortcuts or sidestep or being the heavyweight all the time is stepping away, setting boundaries, right? I mean, we even sometimes have to do that with our parents of like, you know what? I'm happy to talk about this, but here's the things I don't want your advice or guidance on, because it doesn't serve my higher purpose, or it further wounds my inner child, or just not being as available to some people who are very triggering to us. Speaking your truth too with friends who, I have a client who is really trying to make some better choices in her life, and be a better version of herself. And her friends are, in their late 20s, still living like they're in their early 20s, going out drinking on the weekends and pressuring her to have yet again another shot or stay up half the night. And like, she recognizes like this wreaks havoc on her body the next day. This isn't, I mean, she wants to settle down and have a family and possibly look at, the next step in her career move. It like doesn't serve her. And she's had a really hard time standing up to these friends and saying, you know what, like, this is the last one for me. Or, maybe organizing different social events around hiking or things that are a better frequency match for the type of lifestyle she's wanting to manifest. Right? So how do we step out of being a follower and step into the role of being more of a leader? right? Or an inspirer.
For your own life, I would say. Not everyone is meant to be a leader for others, at least not in all parts of life. I mean, you could be a leader in a little part of your life because that's where you are. Now I'm just looking at all the question marks I have here. You talked about mystical meditation to go deeper. So is that like the advanced level from your meditations you do? Or what was it again?
It's beautiful. So a lot of times with more traditional meditation, it's about quieting the mind, right? And it's, we meditate for the purpose of relaxation. Not all of my clients necessarily are comfortable with this, or are willing to practice this candle meditation long enough. I don't mean in duration, but, creating space in their daily lives to integrate this tool into their practice. But, on the first level of candle meditation, it is about taking the body out of fight or flight. But the next level is really, really tapping into the inner wisdom or higher wisdom, as the case may be. And so it is, for me, it's a mediumistic tool about tapping into the wisdom of the higher realms, right? And you'll know the difference between the divine mind is already connected to divine source, whomever, whatever you think that is, right? For some people, it's God. For other people, it's Buddha. Some people, it's nature or spirit guides. For some of my clients, it's a higher intelligence, and they choose not to have any sort of necessarily religious labeling or connotation, and that's perfectly fine, whatever it is. Okay, but whatever it is to you, that wisdom exists inside of you already. So it is opening up the spiritual pathways to receive whatever it is intuitively the higher mind knows that you need in order to promote healing.
And that's something you help people with, as I understand.
Yeah, absolutely. We all have mediumistic abilities. We are all clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. And when we practice this tool and some of the other more sophisticated tools I teach in my space, we begin to open or refine uncover, open, refine these clairs, these otherworldly senses and deep intuitive abilities that all of us have. And that then becomes such an important anchor in our own healing, but also in manifestation, right? And creating more positive outcomes.
So you say in your space, you teach them in your space. So you have like classes you give as well, or?
I do. So for clients who have worked with me one-to-one, I call it a short course because I don't keep, some of my clients have chosen to continue working with me, after the intensive work that we do, just simply because they enjoy it and maybe they want to connect with spirit guides or work on their own gifts of the spirit. But for those who have been through my intensive, I created various workshop paths that they can participate in. Right now, they're in person. In the future, Oliver, they'll also be available online. But one of the workshops that I'm running now is using the curriculum from this book. We talked about it, Whispers Beyond the Veil, channeled teachings inspired by the spirit world, because this is a spiritual curriculum. And there's two objectives, really, from this book. Each chapter has journal prompts, right, that spur on within each reader a stronger connection to the higher self or divine mind, But for those who are spiritual seekers, it also serves as a tool to strengthen our connection with the higher realm. And so one of the workshops I'm running now is once a month, we do a deep dive into several of the chapters, and we come together as a spiritual community to discuss the journal prompts and how it's playing out in our own individual lives. Okay. And then also through this particular workshop, Spirit helps spontaneously design some deeper meditations that I do with the group to help them, again, release and recalibrate along the theme lines presented by the spirit world. So that's the first group. The second group is an actual sitting circle, and it's invite only, and I'll explain that a little bit. I'm amidst my physical mediumship unfoldment. And so it's a group of individuals I've worked with as clients who Spirit has identified as high frequency beings who have very, very, how can I say, mediumistic gifts of their own, light worker types with gifts of the spirit that could benefit from mentorship, refinement, further support for me. And so through these sitting circles, I'm teaching them more about seances and spirit communication. And together, we're using our combined frequencies in order to produce physical evidence together from the spirit realm. And so this is a brand new group. I ran a smaller version of this a couple years ago, but I've received lots of training and lots of downloads over the last couple of years. And so I'm using the downloads and the trainings in these, in this second workshop that I run. And again, these are clients of mine who have helper healers in their own right, who really want to learn more about the spirit world and continue in their own mediumship unfoldment. So it takes the form of a sitting circle. The first half, I share concepts and tools used for communication with spirits, share what I've read, share what I've learned, what spirit has brought through. So a lot of channeling. The second part is we all sit in silence and connect with the spirit realm. And then we share the experiences that we have while we're in the trance state.
Oh, but these you said physical. That means they're in Seattle.
Yeah, they are in my geographic area.
Somewhere in the forest, the witchcraft group is sitting around the fire.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because I'm more of a theist. However, never espouse the religious dogma piece of that. I've loved the work of Dolores Cannon. I attribute her with rewriting religious history in a way that really, really resonates with my soul, but all are welcome in my space. I have one of my clients has a strong connection to other higher intelligences and light beings from other planets. I've since been able to make that connection also, but people coming to my space are welcome to bring whatever their beliefs are. And we lovingly share and challenge and inspire each other with our own understanding of higher realms. And And it's a wonderful blending of high frequency energy with clients with very different backgrounds. The common thread is the high frequency, and each one of them carries a high frequency of love, compassion, and a deep inspiration to infuse more light and love into the world. Not all
Yeah.
of them, by the way, working in healing, typical healing or alternative healing professions. One woman comes from the insurance world, and she's very high frequency and very connected to the spirit realm. The other comes from banking, the other from a legal background. So, I mean, it debunks the myth that, mediums or people who do this work or our whole lives we've been working in these offbeat, odd luck professions. Myself included, I come from more of a corporate background.
Spiritual bypassing. How do you understand that, and how do you see if someone listens to this episode, how can we avoid that we are bypassing our spiritual growth? Now that you said you also had the soul upgrade through your near-death experience.
When you say spiritual bypassing, you mean do you mean like we are continuing to evolve spiritually?
It's you hear, at least I heard lately, the last half year, perhaps a year, the spiritual bypassing, that you do all kind of these spiritual things in life, but you're actually not really growing as a soul or human being. You kind of avoid growth.
Absolutely.
So you use the spiritual world to bypass your growth.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's brilliant. And I think when we work in the realm of spiritual healing, or we've been called to work as a teacher or a mentor, even in a non-spiritual setting, it behooves us all to work on our own frequency and our own journey as a gateway to promoting a shift in the collective frequency. So, bypassing is like, we can read we can read these great spiritual works. We can get a massage. We can go to yoga. We can get acupuncture. We can fill up, and I see my clients do it all the time. They'll chase these different modalities thinking that something or someone outside of them contains the magical incantation or the magic bullet to self-healing, but they're not willing to journey inward, right? To do the deeper work internally, and that internal recalibration that's necessary in order for us to experience shifts in our personal lives, if that makes sense. And I'm as I'm answering that, I'm trying to dig through my book because there's a passage that talks about that. But did that answer a little bit of your question about spiritual body?
Yeah, and then the question comes up, like, have you been able to help people, like spiritual leaders even, to see their bypassing patterns and help them to move on to the next level?
Oh, I think absolutely. I mean, a couple things that I always keep in mind before I agree to work with a client or I'm in the process of evaluating whether I'm a good fit for the other client. One is, are they a teachable soul? Now, I don't say that out of arrogance. And I'm not meaning like, are they willing to be taught what I have to teach them? It's more like, are they willing to listen to their own wisdom? Are they willing to slow down long enough to listen to their own soul's wisdom, because that's really important. Not everybody is ready or willing to do that. They think that, by being busy and doing all these spiritual things, that's checking all the boxes. The other piece is, are they ready to entertain the idea that the most powerful healer of all is not me or their chiropractor or their energy healer or their therapist or their spiritual guru, but it's them. It's themselves. Because it's pretty short-sighted, and I would even say dangerous, to hire somebody else to fix you, right? Do other people around you have great tools that can spur on in you further healing? Yes, right? But ultimately, you are responsible for your own healing, physically, mentally, cognitively, emotionally, spiritually, etherically. This is your journey. So I need to see in people a level of personal responsibility. I mean, even if you have a surgery that fixes something, which, by the way, I've had many surgeries, and maybe the surgery didn't turn out exactly how you thought it should. It didn't fix everything. It behooves us all to ask the deeper question: is there something inside me that I need to release in order to promote healing on all the levels? So, on the front end, I'm doing these consultations and I'm asking my clients, I want to know that they're capable of thinking on a deeper level. They're not just interested in coming to me so that I can, flip a switch or wave my magic, hypnosis wand to make them better. It is their personal responsibility, and they need to have a willingness to look at their patterns and look at how they've created some of the chaos that lives inside of their mind and inside of some of their body, right? It's that personal responsibility piece. If those things are in alignment, Oliver, I do think that the tools that I use can be very helpful, but if people are coming with that Western medicine model of like, I'm the client, you're the guru, fix me, this isn't going to work. It's not going to work. They're going to have that resistance piece. Believe it or not, some of my toughest clients were people I would have considered to be in professions that were more spiritual in nature, yet they were tough clients, because even though, on paper they seemed to embrace more of a spiritual perspective, on the inside, their minds were really rather rigid and textbookish and Western medicine model. I finally found the passage in my book. It's beyond books and gurus. There is no speaker or book on earth that can replace the wisdom of connecting with spirit. None. Okay. And it goes on to say, you can spend a lifetime devouring spiritual texts and never hear the whisper meant just for you. That whisper only comes in the quiet, in the power. This is not to dismiss teachings or mentors. They have their sacred space, but spirit must be your first and final authority. You must become the tuning fork. So sitting in the power, which is what I teach my client, teaches you how to discern what resonates and what doesn't. Not because someone told you, but because you can feel it in your bone. Okay, intuition.
Wow, that's definitely deep. And that was from your book.
Yeah. Yeah. Beyond Books and Gurus is the name of the subheading. And it's in chapter 1, the sacred practice of sitting in the power, understanding the presence of spirit within. That really deeply encompasses the work that I do here. Right? I can give people say I need your advice. I'm like, stop right there. Right? I'm gonna in the best of circumstances, Oliver, I'm listening to my clients with my spiritual ear. I'm listening to as much of what they're not saying or avoiding, or I'm looking for the canned rehearsed responses, which I know they've lifted from a text or from a spiritual mentor, right? But they don't really, it hasn't really landed within them on a soul deep level, because if it had, their lives would look different, right? They would be making different choices.
Wow. Yeah, so I think this is a good segue into your book to shortly talk about what is the book
Yeah.
and for who is it and what
Yeah.
can people expect from the book.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this can be found on Amazon. I've had a couple people reach out to me and they're like, is there any other place besides Amazon where you can get the book? Oh, and I get where they're going. And I can just say I'm working on it. Amazon, you can get this. There's a companion journal called The Whispers Within. Whispers Within is just the journal prompts. So a lot of people like to write down their responses, especially the ones who are in my groups, and bring the journal so they can share their thoughts or ideas. Or as a personal reference, they can go back to their journal prompts a week or two later, and it helps reground them and refocus them, and help them reevaluate, like, how did I live this past week? What shifts and changes do I feel as a result of doing this deep spiritual dive? Okay. What can people expect? I'm channeling the energy of a beautiful soul that passed away just a handful of years ago. I've chosen not to disclose her name. She was a medium healer and a highly evolved soul, who, interestingly, I did not know. I only recently became aware of her presence through a colleague at a workshop who did a trance healing exchange with me. It was a very, very interesting. The night I came home from this 1 week workshop, I was awakened by the sweet and beautiful voice of the spirit. At the time of the writing of this book, I had no aspirations to write a book. It wasn't on my radar. And when spirit came to me day after day after day, it was maybe a half a week into these morning downloads that I realized, I think there is a book that is forming from this downloaded wisdom. So the process of writing this book, which, by the way, I didn't even know what the content would be or the title. My protocol was, I was initially awakened in the middle of the night. I listened to the downloads. I sit at my computer, and through a process called automatic writing, spirit blends with me and writes the book for me. I realized, we're forming chapters with themes, very distinctive themes. And from the themes in the chapters came a book. It took about 6 to 8 weeks to get these downloads. And what I came to realize is that through my colleague who studied under this medium who has since passed, it's my understanding, she had meant to publish some sort of curriculum for her students and never got there before she passed. And so I do believe that this book is at least part of the curriculum that she's bringing through from the higher realms. And it is all about helping each one of us connect with the divine self in the higher realms. And so each book or each chapter here, right, she walks us through the process of sitting in the power, which is a mediumistic practice of opening up our spiritual pathways and inviting the energies of the unseen world to merge with us and to share whatever it is they wish to bring through. She talks in chapter 2 about reframing the art of prayer from asking to listening, okay, which is really beautiful. And she broadens our understanding of spiritual communication, right? And creating space in our lives to sit and listen and to be open to receiving what the spirit realm wishes to bring through in whatever form. She talks a lot about our life. It helps us to see ourselves and our life here on planet Earth through a spiritual lens. She talks about spirit-led versus ego-led living, which is so beautiful and so amazing. And listening to and following the organic flow of the soul. What I love about this book is she debunks the myth that mediums are standing on platforms and giving readings in a public forum or setting up shop in a studio or in an office or in their sanctuary and doing these cold readings for people. She shares with us a greater framework for understanding how each and every one of us are a channel in some way, shape, or form, right? Through our friendships, through our work relationships, through the organic current and flow of life, that each one of us is called to administer messages or energies from higher realms. And so she shares a lot of deepening questions in the form of journal prompts that get us to really analyze the ways in which spirit is already flowing through us in our daily practices and our relationships and lives. She also talks about, hey, we don't have to be in this, we don't have to go to yoga or into a state of meditation to connect with spirit. That spirit connects with us, right? In the shower, when we're driving, when we're washing dishes. There can be a beautiful and subtle frequency shift that occurs when we're focusing on something very simple, right? And we're not necessarily having to multitask. It creates an open door for spirit to come through and their messages to land very deeply when we're gardening or taking our dog for a walk. And we're engaging in some of the simple pieces and parts of our life. She talks about wisdom, the difference between wisdom and knowledge, right? And how we're mostly information stuffing and how to tap into that deeper wisdom and why it's important, right? I mean, it explains why the spiritual coaching and looking through more of a spiritual lens is such an important part of our healing journey, because it gives us a greater context of understanding the whys and the what next. And then, she talks a lot about remembrance, that this lifetime is it's less about performance. It's more about remembering who we are as a soul, right? And rearranging our priorities in greater alignment with our gifts.
Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, people have to go to Amazon, as you said, and you work on you
Yeah.
work on other paths.
Yeah.
And we are close to 2 hours, and I don't know how much more time you have. And I just was thinking, what is like the overall message we want to give for this episode to our clients? Where can they reach out to get healing or teaching or connect generally with you?
Right.
And if I forgot anything else.
Oh no, it's so beautiful. I'm really, the message or takeaway I'm hoping listeners will receive today is, to understand the difference between transactional healing and transformational healing. Okay. I practice transformational healing. And I believe that is because I truly believe the answers lie within each one of us. And that each one of us is wired to heal ourselves. Again, it's not that, different books or healing tools can't spur on in us or catapult us forward in our healing journey, but the answers really do lie within you. And so, I urge people, if they feel like they've hit a wall or are facing blocks on their current path and evolution, to try spiritual hypnotherapy as a potential modality for igniting the healer that exists within themselves. And in terms of how to reach me, best way to reach me is to go to my website, and that's sensoriumhypnosis.com. SENSORIUM, sensoriumhypnosis.com. Sensorium means senses. There's so much there at my website. One, you can schedule a consultation. Two, you could just do a deep dive and schedule one virtual healing session to try this on. Like, what does this look like? What does it feel like to release and recalibrate in a mini session? You'll find my book there, links to my book and the companion journal. You can, under resources, read blogs on so many different topics, which will connect you to all my social media outlets too. So that's the best way to find me. And I encourage people, treat yourself to a consultation just to explore if what you're enduring might be a good match for some of the tools that I use. And give yourself an opportunity to ask questions about the work that I do and how it might speak to some of your life challenges.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. Yeah. The webpage is the first point of contact, so to speak. And from there, yeah, you also have your own podcast or YouTube. And you shared with me your candle meditation, so I will add it as well to this episode. And yeah, with that, I say thank you so much for what is in deep 2 discussions we had.
Thank you, Oliver. I loved our time. Thank you.
Thank you. And listeners, you know what to do. Click, like, share, comment, and yeah, ask questions. We are here to answer questions. Super. Thank you so much, and see you for another episode.